Let's head back to Australia, where a story that involved the then acting Immigration Minister, Alan Tudge.
The acting Immigration Minister has a mark against his name. Last week, a federal court found Alan Tudge acted unlawfully in March of this year after refusing to release an asylum seeker from detention, despite the man being granted a temporary protection visa.
This is absolutely a case of a minister thinking that he is above the law.
That case concerned an appeal by an Afghanistan citizen who arrived in Australia in 2012 and later applied for a protection visa. Well, this was rejected in December 2019 on character grounds following the man's conviction for assault. On the 11th of March 2020, the Administrative Appeals Tribunal overturned that decision and ordered the man be granted a visa. The minister immediately appealed the AAT judgment in federal court, but the applicant remained in the Yongah Hill Detention Centre in Western Australia for another 5 days until the federal court ordered his release. Well, in subsequent proceedings, Justice Geoffrey Flick of the federal court said regarding Alan Tudge, "In the absence of explanation, the minister has engaged in conduct which can only be described as criminal. That he had unlawfully deprived a person of his liberty, and his conduct exposes to him both civil and potentially criminal sanctions, not limited to a proceeding for contempt." Strong words, but at the time, the minister also rejected Judge's findings and made it clear that he was considering an appeal. Nonetheless, this didn't stop ABC's Virginia Trioli from demanding the minister resign there on the spot.
The trouble, of course, when we get to speak to you now these days, Minister Tudge, is that it's very difficult to take seriously what is said by a man who's been found by the federal court to have engaged in conduct which can only be described as criminal in relation, of course, to depriving an asylum seeker of his liberty. So the question still hangs over your head, Alan Tudge, about why you believe you can still hold down the job that you do when you've been found by one of the highest courts in the land to have engaged in conduct that is criminal. I don't think you get to reject assertions or findings by a court. Isn't they're not assertions, they're findings by a court. And I wish we all got to reject findings by a judge, but I don't think we do, and I don't think ministers are above the law.
It was commentary of this particular judge. He actually
Since when can we describe a finding by judges as commentary? That's curious.
If I can finish.
Trioli seemed to think that this was definitive and final. But as solicitor and author James Miller tweeted at the time, "OK, once more for the dim-witted ones who just don't get it. No judge should describe any conduct as criminal, other than the conclusion of a criminal trial. The error here lies with the judge." Well, guess what? Yesterday, the full bench of the federal court unanimously overturned this decision, saying that Minister Tudge had no relevant knowledge at the time of the circumstances which gave rise to both the justified and unjustified criticism. The suggestion that the minister may have acted criminally could only be understood as a personal criticism of the minister raised without according procedural fairness to this particular minister to respond to that criticism. No doubt Virginia Trioli will be retracting her comments about Tudge, as well as giving wide publicity to the full judgment of the bench. Well, the ABC itself has failed on that charge. The news article about the decision reads, "Federal court accepts appeal from federal MP Alan Tudge after judge said he may have acted criminally." So instead of a headline reporting the judge was wrong to label Tudge a criminal, the ABC managed to write a headline which may have given you the opposite impression. Accepting an appeal from Tudge may have nothing to do with the allegation of criminality, so the headline needs to be much clearer that the judge was wrong to use that slur. And in the article itself, Cameron Gooley made you read 4 paragraphs before you learned that Justice Flick's criticism was unwarranted. Hopefully this is just incredibly sloppy journalism and not a deliberate attempt to mislead the public. Rebecca, what do you make of it? Did you see the original stories and criticism at the time? How do you think the ABC's handled this?
I think that the ABC is just descending into a level of bias and prejudice against the Liberal ministers and the coalition government that is completely unacceptable. I only watch it for professional reasons. I find it too infuriating. I think they have a grudge against Alan Tudge. I think we've seen that. They've dragged him through the mud for things that were simply personal matters that had no criminal intent. And yet, if you look at the sort of crimes that are being conducted where ALP, presidents and so forth have been found guilty of actual crimes, and the ABC gives it hardly a mention, It's just not fair, and I think that's why the ABC has lost such a big audience share.
It's not fair to Tudge as well, is it, Kel?
No, of course it's not. The reason, I'm not a lawyer, but even as a non-lawyer, as an ordinary citizen, I know the reason why there are appeal courts is because lower courts sometimes get it wrong. That's why there are appeal courts. When I read the judgment by the full bench of the appeal court, they seem to be saying that Judge Flick was making comments. He was offering his own personal comments. Those words about criminal conduct did not come in his judgment, as it were. So if you go to the Virginia Trioli piece, what Alan Tudge said was right. This was commentary. This was a comment by the judge. This was not his judgment. It was his commentary on his judgment.
And he didn't get a chance to defend himself, and he wasn't on trial. So they stepped way beyond the realm of what they were able to comment on.
Will you think about the performance from Virginia Trioli? She may be a really nice person, but she sounded arrogant. She kept talking over him, she kept interrupting him, she wouldn't listen to him, and she offered a very strong editorial opinion. This is the ABC. This is an editorial opinion. I think, you're clearly, the judge was right, you clearly are guilty of some sort of criminal conduct. There was an editorial opinion and a line being pushed in I think, an offensively arrogant way. That's how it came across to me. That's not good journalism.